Hello and welcome to this edition of Consciousness Raising Online. And okay, you can hear me now, can't you? Thank you, Clyde. Good to see you. I missed you. I missed being here last week and missed you. Um, and I hope that River is able to get in. She was saying to me that she hadn't been able to get in, but I told her how to try to jack in here. Uh, I'm going to jump right into this subject because it's actually in two phases. But in order to get to the second phase, I have to go through the first phase. And that basically is talking about something that is kind of a paradigm shift for some people. Um, I said that the racial wealth gap is proof that the system works the way it's supposed to. And when I say for some people, it may be a paradigm shift, is because of this. Some of us believe that the system would work for us. It just needs to be reformed. Uh, that that it could work for everybody, fair and square. It just needs some tweaking and some reforms. Well, I say this, and I'm going to demonstrate this in a minute. That in reality, the system, when we're talking about the social economic system in the West of the world, capitalism, um, it works the way it's supposed to. It's not supposed to work for us to be even with the people who define themselves as white people. The system is designed for white people to be on top. It's as simple as that. Now, we can be upset about it, and that's fair, but you cannot make it work for you if it's not designed to do that. Now, a couple of things some concepts I want to throw at you right quick. Um, there's been a thing over the last few years to say that race is a social construct, that is not real. Well, I say that race is an economic construct. It was constructed in order to benefit economically white people, the people who define themselves as white. Remember, race as a thing didn't really come into existence uh, as a serious thing until a few hundred years ago here in the United States. And it was an economic construct. It wasn't a social, uh, that's included, but it was primarily to benefit white people economically. Okay. Now, one of the beliefs that people have about this whole system thing, um, some people believe that jobs are a solution to poverty. Okay? Um, the racial wealth divide in the United States goes back centuries since this country was started. It's been created and held in place by public policies. Let me say that again. The racial wealth divide, it goes back centuries. It was created and held in place by public policies, not by personal beliefs, by public policies that have evolved with time, including slavery. That was a public policy. Jim Crow, public policy. Redlining, public policy. Mass incarceration, public policy. Those were not individual beliefs, those were public policies. And What that means is that black people cannot close the racial wealth gap simply by changing our individual behavior. You see, that's one of the fallacies about the system, because too many of us believe that all we got to do is change our individual behavior and it'll be straight. There's some myths about that, about individualized behavior that black folks can take as a group, and it could substantially close the divide. Those those beliefs, myths, going to college, working harder, buying a house, banking black, saving more, improving financial literacy rates and entrepreneurship rates, uh, improving personal responsibility, emulating model minorities, or increasing 10-parent households. Mm. Now, these could help individual situations, but that would not change the system overall. Okay? Uh, it's already been shown that we can go to college and we still make less with a college degree than a white boy without a college degree. We can make less than a white boy with a GED. All right, so I want you to understand that this system works the way it's supposed to. I'll show you what I mean. The graphic is up here now. Okay, wealth. What is wealth? Well, wealth is basically the sum total of what a family owns minus what they owe. Okay, it's a total of what you own minus what you owe. Sometimes it's called net worth. Household wealth is a measure of total assets minus uh, liabilities or debt. And wealth is critical to economic stability. Uh, More than income or employment rates or other economic indicators, wealth reflects in a family's ability to overcome unexpected financial challenges. It's usually or many times the difference between whether a financial setback, like somebody loses a job or a medical emergency, it can either appear as a minor unpleasantry or it can leave a family in financial ruin. When we look at black families, we know that that's the truth. Say somebody in the family got a really good job and the rest of the family members got kind of okay jobs, but we sort of depend on that person with a really good job to have certain responsibilities towards the whole family. Now, if that person with that really good job loses that job, that can change the whole trajectory for that whole family. Okay? Now, wealth provides the collateral security to get what we call financial stability, to take risk, and to acquire additional wealth. It's just that simple. It also intergenerational transfers, mobility for future generations. Now, look at that graph again. Wealth is what we own minus what we owe. The median wealth of white households is 16 times that of African American households and 14 times that of Latino households. When you look at the numbers, it means that the median white family has a wealth uh, of $111,000. In other words, when you take what they own and subtract what they owe, they have $111,000 to the good. Latinos, 8,000. Black people, 7,000. when you think about it, think of it like this. When you think about your family members, think about your family members, and you'll see that that's about right. In fact, it's actually less than that. Uh, in some cases, depending, well, especially after the, what do they call it? The recession. It's dropped a little bit. It dropped a little bit for everybody, but in our cases, it can be terrible. Look, we went from 7,000 down to 3,600, and white families went down from what was 100 and what was that? Uh, let me see. For white families, they went from 171,000 down to 147. Oh, excuse me. They went up. You notice that? Yeah, let me show you. Okay. They went from 111,000 to 147,000. Now that should hurt our feelings. Of course it don't, because most of us don't pay any attention to that. Not understanding that. Let me put it like this. For every dollar that we lose in terms of wealth accumulation, it doesn't disappear. It goes to somebody else. You know, I love it when they say stock market lost such and such today. It's not lost. It doesn't disappear. It went to somebody else. Let's look at it over the last 3 decades. All right, look at this close. Black and Latinos families. Wow, this is deep here, y'all. Black and Latino families are twice as likely to have zero wealth. Twice as likely to have zero wealth or negative net worth. In other words, as you look at this whole chart here, when you take all of us, okay, approximately 21% today would have zero wealth, but that's something like 79% would have some wealth. When we look at it, white people today, 15.5%. In other words, only 15.5% of white families have no wealth. That's what that means. It means 84.5% of white families have wealth. Black folks, 37% of us today have no wealth. How much is that? 53%? Something like that, 63%, something. That's a high ass total. 37% have no wealth because it pulls down the rest. Because the rest are members of families, they have to make it up. Latino families today, roughly 33% have no wealth. And I'm trying not to be negative. Oh, here's the one I wanted to look at for over 3 decades. Oh, I see what happened. I'm sorry, I was showing you all the wrong one. Okay, this is the one I wanted to see. Over 3 decades, how much has grown? Now, from 83 to 2016, overall, it went down a little bit for everybody as a whole. Now, check this out. This is real slick here. It went from 84,000 in 1983 down to 81,000 in 2016. So in other words, all of us together, it went down a little bit. But when you look at white, it went from 1983 to 2016, it went up for them. You dig what I'm saying? Then you look at black folks, it went down for us from 7,000 to 3,500. Latinos, it went up. So you notice, for us, it went down. Latinos, it went up, and for white people, it really went up. Now, where do you think their up came from? Their up came from us, because that's how it works. Okay? Now, let me put that in another perspective here. The racial wealth divide snapshot. I want you to get a picture. And I'm getting to a point here that will make sense. Between 1983 and 2016, the median black family saw their wealth drop by more than half after adjusting for inflation, compared to a 33% increase for the median white household. Now, why would that happen? If the economy is doing better overall, and we supposedly have had more opportunities since 1983 to 2016, why did our wealth drop by more than half? Something's going on here. Okay, the Forbes 400 richest Americans own more wealth than all black households put together, plus 25% of Latino households. What? The Forbes 400 richest Americans own more wealth than all the black people put together. Black families are about 20 times more likely to have zero or negative wealth than they are to have 1 million more in assets. Only 1.9% of black folks have more than $1 million in assets. And we have to understand, it doesn't mean they got $1 million in cash. It means that they get, when you consider houses, cars, and other stuff. Okay? 15% of white folks have a millionaire status. 1 out of every 15? No, let me see. 15%. What is that? We're my mathematicians. If 15% of white people have $1 million, how many is that? Out of 100? Well, 15 out of every 100. 15 out of every 100 white folks got $1 million in assets? Something's wrong with that picture. Okay? This is what I mean when I say that you cannot, by individual effort, change what is facts. The facts is that our individual behavior cannot change the formula. And the formula is designed for whites to make more, get more, keep more. That's how the system is designed. We saw it straight out when Trump and those senators pulled one of the biggest grand thefts in the history of the United States when they cut this tax break for the rich. They did it in our face, laughing at us all the way to the bank. They cut the tax rate for corporations so low that big corporations not only got to keep a hefty amount of billions of dollars, some of them even got a rebate from us. Go look it up. I ain't lying. Okay? So, wealth concentration widens the racial wealth divide. Now, take a second here. I know that was a lot to throw on you, but it's important to understand what's happening. Because one of the ways that wealth is passed, wealth moves from one generation to the other, is that it's inherited from their families. But in the last 50 years, there's been a secondary way. It's not just passed generationally from the older generation to the younger generation. They've been doing it through corporate pass alongs. When you see that a corporate executive, especially CEOs and presidents and those folks there, when you see them making what's the equivalent of 65 and 70 times as much as a worker in their own company, that's passing generational wealth, whether you realize it or not. And it's become a thing, like I say, in the last 50 years, that corporate presidents and executives, et cetera, CEOs and CFOs and COOs, they get paid an astounding amount of money. An astounding amount of money. And yeah, you got a little tiny sprinkling, one or two black folks in there, here and there, but you have a majority of white males. There's a few white women in there too, but it's a majority of white males who've been getting this money. And it got to the point where it's outrageous. Um, there's a big debate going on in this country about minimum wage. And, you know, it's not funny, but it's comical when I see these people arguing and debating for trying to get to $15 an hour. Let me share something with you. If we doubled that, if the minimum wage tomorrow in this country went up to $33 an hour, and we look at that and say, ooh, that's a lot. But it can be done easily. $33 an hour on a 40-hour week would be about $63,000 a year. Now, do you think that would help the average family do a little better? Would that increase their quality of life? You daggone right. But they have convinced Americans that that kind of money is not worthy of them. The minimum wage goes with minimum people, minorities, and that only specialized people should get that kind of money an hour, $33 an hour. I'm like this. In fact, I had a little debate or discussion last week with a black woman who was saying that it really wouldn't be fair for workers, because I put it out there. I said, no, we should make minimum wage $33 an hour minimum. And you go up from there. And she said, no, that wouldn't be fair because the corporations couldn't make any money. I said, Miss, do you know how much $1 billion is? And she said, what do you mean? I said, when a company makes $11 billion in profits, do you understand how much it would have cost them to pay their workers $33 an hour? And I broke it down like this, as some of y'all have heard me do. $1 million is 1,000 thousands. If you had a job that paid you $1,000 a day, and you worked 7 days a week for 1,000 days, and you got to keep it all, that would give you $1 million. Okay? $1 billion is 1,000 millions. 1,000 millions. So when you all look at these companies, when you break it, you should do this. Go look at these companies when they issue their financials. And you see these companies, and they're talking about they made $2 and $3 and $4 and $5 and $6 and $12 and $20 billion profit. It should tell you something because there's no way that they can make. Look, if they made $1 billion profit, that means they made 1,000 millions off of their workers. That's outrageous. Workers should not allow that to be the standard. But they have made it be okay in America because, number one, they stripped us of our history, so we don't really understand the virtue of unionizing, unity. And so we think it's all right when we see that a corporation like, oh, Disney, look at Disney. Go look at their financials sometimes. You'd be amazed. Billions of dollars in profits. You say, well, that's okay. They make a lot. They make a lot of movies and they do this and they do that. I'm telling y'all, they are squeezing workers because they could afford to pay their workers $35 and $40 an hour minimum wage, and they would still make billions of dollars in profits. I'm kind of stuck on that because, yeah, I know, Clyde. I'm stuck on that because this is where we get to the next level. You know, we've been trying to figure out how we should get this reparations. And I think it should be broken down in several ways. One is that we should look at reparations, and we should also look at restitution. Yes, restitution. Now, what's the difference? Reparations is the repair of something. When it comes to black people, we want reparations. That's to repair us. Restitution is the restoration of something lost or stolen to its proper owner. The restoration of something to its original state. Think about it like this. See, we based reparations on this idea of what's owed to our ancestors. Okay? But it's very challenging, and white folks do this all the time to us. It's very challenging to be able to be clear about what would be owed to us today. Well, we'd have to be able to show that something was stolen from us, and restoration to get us back to our original state. Now, the law of restitution is the law of gains-based recovery. Let me explain that. Let me explain it like this. There's the law of compensation, which is loss-based recovery. So, if restitution is paid, the defendant has to give up his or her gains to the claimant. When compensation is ordered, the defendant has to pay the claimant for his or her loss. Let me break it down for you. Reparations, most of the time, ends up being based on the law of compensation, in that we want to be compensated for our loss. Okay? And so that gets into a whole thing of how much money, you know, how many years of free labor and all of that. And okay, that's just one aspect. The other aspect is law of restitution, which says the defendant must give up his or her gains to the claimant. In other words, the corporations which have benefited from slavery, which have benefited from Jim Crow, which have benefited from mass incarceration, which have benefited from redlining, all these different public policies, they made gains. And so they would have to give up the gains that they got from these actions. Now, the law of compensation says that they have to compensate us for our loss. When you get to thinking about it like that, that'll break some people, wouldn't it? That would break them. Billions. Because they'd have to pay us for what we have lost, and they would have to give up what they have gained. See, that's what, if you notice, a lot of white folks say, well, I didn't get nothing out of this. I didn't gain nothing from slavery. Well, you gained stuff because you have whiteness. Yeah. Yeah. Whiteness gave you certain gains that I didn't get. You see? That's why they don't like to talk about this. See, it's one thing to say, well, I ain't got to compensate you because I didn't own no slaves. You can't prove I owned any slaves. But if I talk about restitution, then I can talk about what you have gained by being white and I being black. When they gave away the land, y'all seen that Martin Luther King where he talks about how they gave away land to whites out west, gave them all this land. And then they gave them all the tools, the seeds and the tools to plant and stuff, right? Now, on the surface, it was saying, well, we ain't got no claim to that because it's just given to white people. The fact that they didn't give it to black people, well, that's just tough, right? However, if we look at that and say, well, what did the whites gain by getting all that free land and all that free help? What did they gain? And that's where restitution comes in, because they wouldn't allow us to participate. They gained a lot, didn't they? That's what they'd have to give up. Restitution. We have to start using that word in relationship to reparations, I believe. The two words are compensation and restitution. And so when they get to talking about they ain't got no money, I just showed you where that money was. I just showed you where that wealth is. That's the racial wealth gap. Is how come white families have so much more wealth than black people do. They didn't get it by magic, and they didn't get it by working harder than us, because ain't nobody worked harder than us. Right? Yeah. Restitution and compensation. Those are the things that, in my mind, should be a part of reparations. There's also something else. Unjust enrichment. And some of my more legal-minded brothers and sisters, y'all know what I'm talking about immediately. Unjust enrichment. This is what occurs when one person is enriched at the expense of another in circumstances that the law sees as unjust. When an individual is unjustly enriched, the law imposes an obligation upon the recipient to make restitution. So for an example, let's say that my great-great-grandfather, he had a bunch of land, and he had farm. He had a good farm. And they lynched my grandfather, my great-grandfather, okay? Who got that land? Well, whoever got that land, that's called unjust enrichment. And so they got to give up what? Restitution. Y'all follow where I'm going here? See, we have to understand that the wealth is there. We have to understand how we have to approach it to get it, and stop allowing them to define how we do this. Um, Now, I'm just going to mention a few things here about where, as we're working towards those things, how we can make our lives better uh, as we work on this, as we work on getting restitution and compensation for unjust enrichment, as we work towards reparations. One, some of that, see, and let me say this at the outset, I don't believe we should go for just simply cash. And the reason I say that is this, and they'll keep us there. In fact, if you listen to white people, they'll always try to make you talk about cash. Okay? Money. The problem with that is if they give us money tomorrow, we can't do nothing but give it right back to them because we have to buy stuff. Okay? And whatever we want to buy, they just raise the price. A car that costs $10,000 today, as soon as you get your reparations check, that car is now going to cost $100,000. The groceries that you spend $100 on today, tomorrow after you get your reparations check, them groceries are going to cost you $1,000. That's why cash is not enough. You have to do more. Invest in affordable housing. Let me explain what that means. There is not a single state in the United States where a full-time minimum wage worker making the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour can afford to rent a 2-bedroom apartment. Let me say that again. If you're making the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour and you're working full-time, that means 40 hours a week, you still cannot afford a 2-bedroom apartment in no state in this country. Furthermore, there's not a single state with an adequate supply of affordable rental housing for low-income renters. While raising income is obviously important and addressed, as I mentioned before, raising the minimum wage, take it up to $33 an hour, right? We also have to deal with the drastic shortage of affordable housing. Okay? Now, oh, there's somebody calling me. Sorry, y'all. All right. Now, this is a little bit different. And again, these are just some things, they're not permanent things. They're just some things that can help us. They're called baby bonds. Baby bonds. What baby bonds are is it deals with a principle called endowment. Endowment. Colleges and universities, the big ones, they thrive on endowments. Harvard and Yale and all them big colleges like that and universities, they have endowment funds that are in the billions of dollars. That's just money they got stacked up, y'all. And y'all should understand there was a time they didn't cost nothing to go to college. But now baby bonds, what this is, and the thing about endowment is very unfair because it's an inherited advantage. An endowment is like an inheritance. Baby bonds, the way that would work is this. When a child is born, they'll be set up with a baby bond. It's a managed account. In this case, might be the federal government manages if we got a fair government, right? It's set up at the birth of a child, and it's endowed by the federal government with assets that will grow over time. Now, when a child reaches adulthood, they can access these funds or use these funds either for education, to purchase a home, or to start a business. Think about that. See, one of the things most black people cannot afford to do is give their children nothing. I never forget when I first went to college. I went to college where there were a lot of white kids. What blew me away, these white kids, when they would graduate, I'll never forget this one guy I knew. His father gave him $100,000 for his first business when he graduated from college. And he told him, he said, well, I expect you to burn this up because most first businesses don't succeed. But I want you to have that experience. Gave him 100 grand to just blow. Wasn't expecting him to make it back at all. Okay? So if we had something like this that would help us, number one, it would be a great incentive for young black people if they knew that they had this baby bond that was growing in value as they kept on living. It would be so cool because they would know that they had value. And there would be a reason to keep learning and keep living. Okay? Like I say, this is just one way, just one thing. Baby bonds. Okay? Now, this is something else. They're called postal banking. Postal banking. You see, the banks they just corrupted everything. But there are millions of people, especially black people, they call them unbanked families. And the reason why is because the banks have been allowed to set all kinds of standards where to have a decent bank account, number one, as y'all know, most of the big banks demand that you have an automatic deposit of X amount or above every month in order to have an account where they're not taking your money. If you have less than that, they'll extract a fee. When they first started doing this, I was so pissed. I said, that is so wrong. And so you have millions of families that are unbanked. It's virtually impossible nowadays. You can get a kid a savings account, but you can't really get them a bank account. Okay? And so, okay, Cory Booker is pushing the baby bond concept. Okay. All right. The banks, they're forced to use expensive check cashing locations or usurious debit cards. You know, what's the boy's name? Russell Simmons. He's got a debit card. And, you know, at one time I started to get one just because it's called a Rush card. And for those who know, my last name is Rush. But when I looked at how much they charge for that damn card and for transactions, I said, this is highway robbery. But see, they let them do that. And see, nowadays you pay so much with debit cards or pay online. So it hurts us in terms of having access to credit, and it also leaves us very open to payday lenders. And I know most of y'all, if you've never had it, I know you got a relative who's gotten caught up in payday lenders. That's robbery. That's robbery. So we have all these post offices around the country. One of the things that could very well be done is expanding their services to include banking transactions, and they can even include small dollar loans. You see, and it would give them a new life. Because think about it, most of our younger people, they don't go to the post office for nothing because they do everything online. They even mail. I mean, you can ask a lot of young people, they've never mailed a letter, never mailed a card. They say, why should I do that? Just go on Facebook and send them send them an email, whatever. I send them a text. Okay, so that would be a way to breathe new life into the postal, call it postal banking. Again, things to make things easier on us while we're trying to move into a new way. Now, some amount of cash. Okay, some amount of cash.
Yeah, there we go.
But, before I go there, I have Medicare, medical services for all. Okay. More than half of the black population
Does increments of 50, huh?
Underinsured or uninsured.
I changed it.
It's 100 volts of 20 is 2000.
The Affordable Health Care Act. But you know,
I went back. I think the money was over.
Mine's all trying to kill that. Okay. Medicare for all is just simply this. It will guarantee quality health care as a human right, not a privilege. Medical care is a right. It's not a privilege. You go to Cuba, medical care is free. You go to some other country, medical care is free.
Yeah, there we go.
Medical care should not be something that causes you to kill you, to kill your family financially. And also,
it's so 50.
Does increments of 50, huh?
Yeah.
I know some of the presidential candidates.
It's 100 volts of 20 is 2000.
But that was a scheme from the beginning.
I went back. I think the money was over.
Years later, had to pay student loans 20 years after I got it. Because at the time, everybody, you ain't never got to pay this back. It was begging. Now, it just happened. I only got a small loan. Because my son was and the guy at the bank said, here, take the money. It's here. You ain't got to pay it back. Don't worry about it. And I didn't.
There we go.
Until 20 years later, and they found me. They said, "Oh, I'm going to go into this loan. You got penalty and interest on here. It took me 4.5 years to pay it. You cannot put it in bankruptcy. They made
It's so
it out.
Does increments of 50, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I changed it.
All right.
It's 100 volts of 20 is 2000.
Student loans also means that they would have to change
I went back. I think the money was over.
All right, but as I said, I think we need to have some amount of cash, but that's to be determined. I think we should work on getting resources. Resources. This changes the whole nature of restitution, compensation, and reparations. What do I mean by that? Well, resources doesn't just mean cash. You get some cash, but we want that in certain ways. We might not even want no US cash. But we want resources. Things like air, water, and land. What does that mean? Well, when I look out across the country, this country has so much in natural resources. It ain't funny. I'll put this map up here just so you can understand. There's plenty of air, land, and water. Air, land, and water. What do I mean by that? Natural resources. Geothermal energy, solar energy, wind power, and hydroelectricity. Now, this is going to blow your mind. See, if we had our own land, we could do stuff like this. You know what geothermal energy is? Look at this diagram here. is when you force cold water down into the earth and then you bring it up as hot water and you generate steam, which can be used to generate electricity. Geothermal is a renewable resource. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? I never really knew kind of what that was until I was doing the research for this. That's one type of natural resource that we could do if we had our own land. Another one, solar energy. Solar energy. Yeah, just simply getting the sun and turn it into electricity. Yeah. And you got people like Trump. He says, "Well, if the sun don't shine, I can't watch TV." He doesn't have a clue. Because now think about this. Already just now gave you two ways. You can get electricity from the sun and you can get electricity from geothermal, right? That's two ways. So if the sun is not out for a day or two or not happy, you still got another way, right? But I ain't through. How about wind power, wind energy? Wind energy. Yes. They have windmill farms. Yeah, look at those. Look at that. They can generate electricity. So that's three ways, right? Three different ways. If we had our own land and our own resources, we could generate our own power. Then there's water energy. Water energy. Yes. Yes. Y'all know what I'm talking about. See, if we had the resources, we could do it ourselves. And anybody tell you we can't do it, they don't understand. We've been doing it for these other folks for the longest. But we didn't have our own land, our own resources. Here's another one. See, we had our own land, trees and stuff. Trees. Give me some trees. I want some trees and some water. Yes. And you can go back to that other map I had earlier. There's plenty of trees and land and water in this country. And also, what's really neat, if we had our own lands with some of these resources, we could then have something we could trade with other countries, whether they're African or not, but especially with African countries. Because understand, with the four different types of energy generation I just gave you, some of them create additional energy. You can put them on a network and you can sell it to other people. Yes. Or we can show them how to do it in their own country. Air, land, and water. Here's water. I'm going to tell you something about air in just a minute. But look at that. See, we could do that. Look at that. Look at that land. Look at that farm. I don't know what they're growing, but boy, wouldn't we like to have that? See, if we had our 40 acres, you ever look and figured out how much 40 acres is? Look at that land right there. That's in the United States. Man, if we had our 40 acres, we could do something with it. But now you got people that say, well, we don't, how do they put it? They say, well, the air is free. No, it's not. I'm going to show you how. And in fact, I'm living proof of how we are really getting to be desperate. As some of y'all may have noticed in the last 15, 20 years, we've had an extremely high, growing rate of young children who have asthma, who have respiratory challenges. I have noticed in the last 15, 20 years that elderly people have respiratory illnesses and challenges. I'm faced with it myself. And I said, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? Well, we know about pollution, air pollution. But, wealth determines that as well. You know why? Because if you have the wealth, you might live in a condo in the city where the air is pumped in 24 hours a day. But here's the deeper thing. You can hop on a plane and go to other areas where the air is much better. The air is better. I know some people saying the air ain't better. Yes, it is. You ever been to the islands? Like Bermuda, Jamaica, the Bahamas? And first of all, the water. You look at that water, and the water is so clear and pure. The air is better. But in this country, you know where wealthy people go? They go like places like Aspen, Colorado, way up high. And the air there is so pure compared to what we have in the city. Yes, the air is better. Ain't that something? So if you have the wealth, you can even breathe better air. As they used to say, the air is rare up there where the wealthy people are. So that's pretty much what I wanted you to understand about the racial wealth gap. That, again, the system works the way it's supposed to. When I showed you those graphs earlier, when some white people, not all of them, some white people who are hip to the game, they understand that when they see those stats the way they are, that white people are way up here and black people way down there, they're happy. They're happy. They know the system is working well. Yes, they don't want us to be on an even playing field. So when they see those stats, they're happy because they know the system is working right. And don't be fooled when you see them making a big deal out of a black person who overcomes tremendous obstacles, like some kid, young person is homeless, but they manage to get straight A's and get all these scholarships. That's dangerous because they'll turn around and say, well, if they could do it, you could do it. No, the system is messed up in the first place because it caused him and a whole lot more to be homeless in the first place. You follow me? And so they like to see that occasional person who is able to rise above the obstacles, because they're not trying to change them obstacles. They don't mind if 1 out of 1,000 gets to do this or 1 out of 500,000 gets to do that, because they're more concerned with the 500,000 who didn't. That's why I say the racial wealth gap is proof that the system works the way it's supposed to. So you can go back over this data at any time. Thank you, Clyde. And I meant to say this. For people who are watching this and you might leave comments, I can't see the comments until after I finish. Only ones I can see is Clyde, because he knows how to put them up over here. But apparently on on YouTube, they have a thing where you can put up comments. And I just wanted to thank somebody who's been very diligent about coming to the classes and leaving comments. I want to appreciate you. All right. And as always, I say, no justice, no peace, no love. KNOW. All right, take this out this way.